DFS, DJ Nation, we are finally back. It's week one. It is, I don't even know what to say. I am so happy that we are finally here. We got NFL football on the screen right now. Bucks Cowboys in the third quarter. Maddie is joining me as always. Ryan, as we know, is not back this year, but he'll be back at some point for sure. He's not gone forever, just gone for right now. But Maddie, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. And as a Cowboys fan, this has been a nice welcome sight to the start of the season. The offense looks really good, and the defense has been playing well also. I'm not really used to smart game plans from the coaching staff, and you can't really run on this Bucks front seven, and Dallas has just gone completely away from the run game in this game. And Dak's thrown the ball 40 times as he throws an interception, right as I say that. But he's thrown the ball 40 times here, and it's not even halfway through the third quarter. So, as a Cowboys fan, it's good to see that they're going to kind of scheme to what the defense is going to allow them this year, which is nice. And, that offense is high-powered, maybe not as high-powered as your Chiefs offense, but that's okay. They're up there with them neck and neck, I think. So, yeah, it's been a good night over here, enjoying this first game of the season. But definitely ready to knock the rust off and jump into this lobby and talk some full week one slate action.
Yes, so much that. And I'm so angry right now. I have a showdown slate. I have a showdown team. It's looking amazing, except for I have Ronald Jones on that team. So fuck Ronald Jones.
And he's in the doghouse now that he fumbled. And you would think Fournette would be in the doghouse too because he dropped that little screen pass, but he was back out on the next series.
That's why I don't do Ronald Jones. Jones. So anyway, let's just get ready. Let's just jump right into it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. There's nothing else to talk about here. So listen, this week one slate is absolutely amazing because there is so much value, right? And I think, at least for me, I don't know if you agree, but I don't think there's really going to be any high ownership. Like I don't think there's going to be like any real mega chalk. I think because there's so much value, it allows you to build in so many different ways. And so is that how you're viewing this slate, or do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, at the moment, I don't really have a feel for where the field's going to go. So I kind of agree. Not only is there a lot of value across the board, but there's a lot of good games to attack this week from, a high total, not only just a high total, but like a high fast-paced offenses that throw the ball a lot. So, I think that this is a really fun opening week to start the season off with.
Well, let's start. So, for us, we do things a little bit different. There's a lot of people that do this, and they just go kind of game by game. Or you have other DFS shows that give you a couple quarterbacks, a couple running backs, whatever. We try to go far more in depth with it and really talk through this, just to give you a better feel of this slate as a whole. And so let's start with the quarterback position. And remember, at the end, we will be building our first week one, main slate roster. So, quarterback, where are you starting this week? Because, like, for me, when I going back when we first started this, like, there was definitely some players that really stood out to me at the quarterback position. And this week, like, I have it narrowed down to where I feel pretty good about it because, one, there's no way I'm going to be able to get away from Jalen Hurts at $6,400. Like, that game could go absolutely nuclear between Philly and Atlanta, two really bad defenses, two pretty solid applied point totals in that game as well. But I also think that the Tennessee-Arizona game, that game is going to be really, really hard to get away from because those two teams, I don't think, you're not really scared of either defenses on each side of those. So, really going, Jalen Hurts at $6,400, Ryan Tannehill at $6,500, definitely in play there. It's been different too because, like, when I built some initial lineups and everything for me, like I love getting Calvin Ridley, even Kyle Pitts and some lineups, but I haven't found myself playing a lot of Matt Ryan. Like I don't know, like I think you can go there, but I don't think it's a must. And then from there, there is some lower end guys that I think you could have some interest in. But where are you going at quarterback this week?
Yeah, so like you said, there's a couple games that jump off the page at you, and you mentioned the two that really stick out to me right off the bat, and that's Philly and Atlanta and Tennessee, Arizona. That Tennessee Arizona game, the pace of that game, if we're talking about similar approaches to last year, you've got Arizona, who ranks second in pace of play in situation neutral, and Tennessee, who ranked third. So you're looking at two offenses who just want to get up there and get moving rather quickly. And that game, I mean, neither team really played much defense last year either. So I got a feeling that game could approach the 60-point total. It's one of the highest totals of the week, and for good reason. But I think it's also going to end up being the most popular. I think you could see Kyler Murray coming in really popular, which makes me hesitant to kind of get away from Kyler in tournaments. And it's not anything against Kyler. I just, like we've always talked about, ownership's a big part of my process. And I'm going to force myself more so than past years, force myself this year to really, really get on some low owned passing stacks. So I think a guy that stands out outside of those two games for me is Aaron Rodgers. The Saints defense, we've mentioned it multiple times, in various videos leading up to this week, but the Saints defense, they're not the same defense that they were last year. They're missing, 5 or 6 key players, whether it's just, retirement or guys that, change teams or guys that are injured. There are a lot of missing pieces from the Saints D that we're used to seeing out there. So while I do love Aaron Jones and think he's going to smash, I also love Aaron Rodgers in the same breath. Like, I don't see a way this Packers team scores less than 30 points this week, so I'm going to have a ton of Packers exposure. Playing in that dome in New Orleans, we got your boy Jameis Winston on the other side, who should be able to put up points. So I like that game as a sneaky shootout that I think could go overlooked. I think you're going to see a lot of people just gravitate to one of the like one player from each team. Like maybe people just play Devontae Adams or just play Aaron Jones or just play Marquez Cavallo. And they don't fully load up that game. And I think I'm going to be different by fully loading up that game. And then there's two other quarterbacks that I really have my eye on right now. One is Josh Allen against Pittsburgh. This Pittsburgh defense is one that, it was okay last year. We're used to them being able to stop everybody, but the defense really didn't play all that great down the stretch last year. And I think you're going to see a lot of people say, oh, well, Pittsburgh defense is like the best in the league. Well, not really. And we know the Bills are not going to run the football. So you've got, 50 pass attempt Josh Allen. Stephon Diggs can have his way against the Pittsburgh defense that plays a ton of man coverage. I really like that Bills-Pittsburgh game. And I think it's just an easy run back with Deontay on the other side against a Bills defense, that allows a lot of short passes, which is Deontay's bread and butter. So that's a pretty easy way to stack up a game that's going to be low owned. And then I know your boy Carson Wentz, but I love Russell Wilson on the other side. We saw Russ first half of last year. I don't think he had a single fantasy point game under 25 points until, Kev, like you've preached multiple times, he got through that second half of the season and teams had all the film on him. They started making adjustments on the defense against him. And they just, on the offensive side of the ball, they never made adjustments in Seattle. So we're seeing in this opening game, Tampa Bay, Dallas, that defense, like this Tampa Bay defense is supposed to be pretty good. And Dallas is just be able to march right down the field on them over and over again. And I think it's because there is a slight edge to offenses in the first couple of weeks of the season. Communication is a big key to playing defense. And I think that these defenses are going to take a couple of weeks to, get a feel for where everybody's at behind them. Make sure everybody's on the same page and really dial up, blitz packages and things like that as the weeks go on. But I think you see a little bit more vanilla defenses in the first week, which can lead to higher weeks. And that's supported by, very high scoring games over the last couple of years in week one. So I absolutely love Russ. And that's another dome game too. So Russ, Josh Allen, and Aaron Rodgers are kind of where I'm leaning right now, but it really doesn't make me feel good not having Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray. But right now, I think those are going to be the two highest owned quarterbacks. So I'm okay with kind of thinking elsewhere.
I was actually going to talk about, I love that game as well. Like, I think that's another game that people are just going to kind of overlook because I do think most of the ownership you're going to see come in on, I do think you're right. I think it's going to be Kyler, possibly Ryan Tannehill, and then, Jalen Hurts for sure is going to be up there as well. And I think a lot of people are going to overlook this game. And I think that's a mistake. It's got I believe it's a 49 point total. The Seahawks have one of the highest applied point totals this week at 40 or 26, excuse me. And so I do like this. And I think the way that you could do this, because while Russ is expensive, and it is going to be expensive to get DK or Lockett in your lineups, but the run back options on the other side of the game, other side of that as well for the Colts, because the Colts pass catchers are extremely cheap. So if you want to pair it up with a Michael Pittman or a Paris Campbell or whatever, I think it makes for a really, really easy stack to get on. And so I do like that stack as well. And I don't think anybody's really going to be on it, or not nearly as much as everybody else is going to be. So I do like that one as well. The other one I do like, and I just feel like that I just feel like this Chiefs game is being overlooked. I think people are looking at this and I definitely think people are going to want pieces. I think, Travis Kelce, obviously, maybe some Tyreek Hill, but nobody, I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about game stacking this game. And it kind of blows my mind when we're talking about one of the highest totals, or if not the highest total probably on the slate here. And the Chiefs have the highest implied point total on the week as well. And while the Chiefs are definitely expensive, but I don't mind not going with Mahomes and going with Baker Mayfield. And in this matchup, his pass catchers are extremely cheap. Odell Beckham or Jarvis Landry if you want to, or even on Austin Hooper. I think the Chiefs were terrible against tight ends last year. And so I definitely think that Austin Hooper could be in play here in this game. So, but nobody's really talking about this game as much as you would think, at least for early on so far this week. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I guess some of these other games are kind of sexy, but this Chiefs-Browns game has the potential to go absolutely nuclear. I mean, we saw in the second half of last year how Baker Mayfield started playing. I mean, he turned his season completely around. In the second half of the season, became one of the best quarterbacks in the league over the second half of the season last year, and that was without Odell Beckham. And now you're adding Odell Beckham, and then Odell Beckham last year in the first half of the season had a 24% target share, over the first 19, and he was wide receiver 19 and season-long formats over that span. So I definitely think Odell still has something left in the tank. So I like getting some Baker at 5,900. I think if you do that, it allows you to get some other pieces in your lineups. I think it makes it really easy to play Christian McCaffrey and another high-end running back that we'll talk about. So I like getting on Baker Mayfield. I don't think he's going to carry any ownership, and I do think that is a mistake at his price.
Yeah, that game is really interesting to me too. Anytime Patrick Mahomes is going to be under-owned, I want Patrick Mahomes exposure because he's got 450-yard and 5-touchdown upside anytime he steps on the field. I do think this Cleveland defense is going to be better this year. But again, week one, if Mahomes is going to be unowned, then I'm definitely in on that. I know you're a big Donovan Peoples-Jones fan. Does he interest you at all this week? Well, we can talk about it when we get to wide receiver, but just since we were on that game, I know there's been good reports on OBJ coming out of camp saying, that he looks ready to go and he's going to see a heavy workload week one. But I mean, we've seen the Browns rotate guys in like Rashard Higgins and things like that. And there's been, DPJ's gotten a lot of buzz in camp and talking about how he might be the next stud wide receiver for that team whenever, OBJ and Landry leave town. But he's 3K and you have to kind of get creative if you're full stacking Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelce, right? Because Mahomes is 8-1, Tyreek is 8-2, and Kelsey's 8-3. So it leaves you 4,200 per player, which is probably why I think Mahomes goes underlooked, because you can't play Christian McCaffrey with those guys. You can't play Devontae Adams with those guys. You can't play any of those other high-priced guys. Like, you have to go all in on the Chiefs, and that's your pay-ups. So yeah, just from playing around with salary, I think that Chiefs are going to go overlooked, and that's terrifying.
Yeah, it's we're not talking about they're playing a really slow team or, something like the Broncos or something like that, they're going to want to try to run the ball and, just kind of slow the game down. Like, I just don't think that's the way this is going to go, week 1 in Arrowhead. So, but as far as Donovan Peoples-Jones goes, like, I mean, I don't think people should be really surprised that he is because, I mean, he's a terrific athlete. I mean, coming out, I mean, he has 86th percentile speed score and a 99th percentile burst score. So he was just really raw. And so it doesn't really surprise me. He's only 22 years old. He's definitely better than, the alternative of Rashard Higgins. Like, I've always thought Rashard Higgins is a bum, but whatever. So it doesn't really surprise me. And I think he brings a different element, to that really deep threat where you have the underneath. Because, I mean, not that I think Odell could still be a deep threat, but I don't think he's not the same guy he used to be whenever he was in his prime, right? He's had a lot of injuries that sapped some of that athleticism. He's still a really good wide receiver, but he's just not the same, he's not the elite wide receiver that he used to be. So I think that Donovan Peoples-Jones kind of brings that element of that deep threat to that offense, along with, Jarvis Landry, who's also, Mr. 0 ADOT himself. So yeah, I don't mind that. So, and
it's solely because, you kind of have to get creative if you're stacking the Chiefs fully, because they leave you no salary. And I mean, that's none of the Browns other than Chubb really scream like very sexy run back on the other side. So, I mean, if you're looking for value anyways, I mean, why not, if you want that game to mega shoot out, why not just grab a cheap piece from the other side that's a freak athlete?
Yeah, one other thing I'll say too is that, I mean, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of 3K wide receivers that people want to play this week, but nobody's going to play him. So he's going to be like a 1%.
He'll be less than 1%.
Yeah. So I don't hate it. Like I think all he needs is to catch one long touchdown, and you're in the money. And then if Terrace Marshall and Elijah Moore and they don't do shit week 1, I mean, because those two wide receivers by themselves are going to carry a lot of ownership. Because of, I mean, that's the guys that you continue to hear people talk about. All these guys are only 3K. Which, don't get me wrong, I love Terrace Marshall and I think he's a decent play himself. But I'm going to be curious to see where his ownership comes in, because if it's something ridiculous, then I will have to fade Terrace Marshall. So
yeah, it's a perfect week to not play any of those chalk super cheap wide receivers.
Yeah, because it can go sideways really quickly.
I mean, it's week 1 and they're all rookies. So,
oh, for sure. I will say this. Speaking of Terrace Marshall, though, I do think Sam Darnold is in play.
Agree.
If you're wanting to pay down a quarterback, I think he's the guy to do it with. Pour one out for Ryan, because if Ryan was here, he'd be talking about the double revenge game narrative for Sam Darnold and Robbie Anderson. I know he is Mr. Narrative. And so, with Sam Darnold only being 5K, I mean, and this is another really cheap game that you can stack up because DJ Moore is not that expensive. I think he's 6,100. And then you have Robbie Anderson, who's I think 5,700. And then we already talked about Terrace Marshall. You're not playing Dan Arnold, but they don't really have a tight end, right? Obviously, Christian McCaffrey. But past that, this is a very cheap stack you can get on. Again, if you want to run something back, I think Corey Davis makes the most sense there. And Corey Davis is like 4,800, I think, somewhere right around there. So it's a very, very cheap stack that if you want to open up a lot of salary to be able to play Christian McCaffrey, because I think you could do that. I have no problem with going Sam Darnold, Christian McCaffrey, and then maybe DJ Moore or something like that if you want to do that. Maybe Robbie Anderson. And then running it back with a Corey Davis. That is one stack that I have found myself having some interest in. I don't know if that's something you'll get on, because I know you're much more of a, single entry, 3-entry max, only run 1 or 2 lineups, in a given week. But for me, I'm definitely going to have some lineups from Sam Darnold in it.
Yeah, no, I actually don't hate that at all. I mean, he's got 3 really good weapons around him, and McCaffrey that he can just dump the ball off to. So, production should not be tough to come by for him. And the Jets are a very bad pass defense, so I don't hate that at all.
Okay, so you have any other quarterbacks you want to talk about?
I'm good on my end. I hit the 3 or 4 that I'm really starting to narrow in on so far.
Yeah, I think honestly the rest of them, it's funny because whenever prices first drop, I remember everybody was really, really excited to play like Joe Burrow and this Bengals offense and everything else. But I think that's really cooled off. I don't really want anything to do with that. I don't mind like a one-off of T. Higgins, but I can't mess around with Joe Burrow. And I wish I could play Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins is too expensive. He's $6,300. It is a great matchup for him against the Bengals, but I just cannot do that at his price. And really kind of the same goes for Trevor Lawrence, 6,200. Like, why play Trevor Lawrence when you could play 200 more to get to Jalen Hurts? I get it's a great matchup, but speaking of running backs, I would rather play James Robinson because I think of all the weeks that you're going to want to play James Robinson, this is 100% the week you want to play James Robinson because the Houston Texans are absolutely atrocious against the run. So I guess let's just go ahead and jump over to the running back position where you have Christian McCaffrey, who's 9,500. You have Dalvin Cook at 9,100, and then Derrick Henry at 8,800, Alvin Kamara at 8,600, and Jonathan Taylor at 8K. Those are your top price running backs above 8K this week. And then you have Saquon, who is questionable for this week, going against Denver at 7,800, Nick Chubb at 7,200, Austin Eckler at 7K, and then DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones, which is absolutely egregious that man is only $6,800. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's 6,600, Miles Sanders, 6,500, James Robinson, 6,400, Najee Harris, 6,300, Joe Mix is 6,200, and then Myles Gaskin at 6K. So of these top guys, where are you coming in at? How much Christian McCaffrey are you going to have at 9,500, which is an absolute steal because almost always, because probably next week he's going to be 10K. So to get him sub 10K is definitely a steal. But what are these top running backs are you wanting to play?
Yeah, it's definitely McCaffrey for me at the top. I do think Dalvin is an interesting pivot. I probably won't end up there, but if I was playing 20 teams like you are, I think the Dalvin Minnesota Vikings defense stack is a very good leverage play in tournaments off of Christian McCaffrey chalk. We always play running backs against the Bengals, and the Bengals, they're dealing with some offensive line issues on their side of the ball. So they may have some struggles moving the ball a little bit, which leads to shorter fields and more possessions for Minnesota against a bad run defense for Dalvin. So I think he's interesting. I probably won't end up there playing only 3 teams, but definitely McCaffrey for me at the top. It's with the Latavius Murray news. I know Tony Jones is like the hottest thing on the sleeper list right now across season long drafts and whatnot. But it's really hard to get away from Kamara, thinking that he's going to get all the high value touches in that offense. He has been getting them, but it's going to be even more so now that Murray's not there to steal any goal line touches away from him. So he's very interesting at 8,600 in that Green Bay New Orleans game that I like a lot. And then scrolling down, Aaron Jones. Here, I'm going to read you the list of Saints players that are no longer there on defense. Sheldon Rankins, defensive tackle. Malcolm Brown, defensive tackle. Trey Hendrickson, defensive end. Quan Alexander, linebacker. Alex Anzalone, linebacker. Craig Robertson, linebacker. Janoris Jenkins, cornerback. Justin Hardy, cornerback. That is a lot of defensive players that the Saints are going to be missing, and this is going to be a completely different defense than what we're used to, especially without Sheldon Rankins plugging the freaking middle of that line there in New Orleans. So I honestly might just lock button Aaron Jones week 1. I've been so excited for him to have a monster season for the last couple months, and I think I might be able to get him at lower ownership because I think the narrative, like I'm seeing blurbs all over the industry, saying Aaron Jones has a tough week 1 matchup. And I'm just like, that's not true. That's not true at all. So I think we can take advantage of some too low Aaron Jones ownership. After that, James Robinson, I think James Robinson is going to end up pretty popular, especially at that price tag. So that kind of scares me a little bit. And especially because we don't know what necessarily Urban Meyer is going to do with Carlos Hyde. I'm not saying Carlos Hyde is good. I'm not saying Carlos Hyde should take touches from James Robinson, but Urban Meyer does dumb shit, and he can absolutely give Carlos Hyde some touches to take away from James Robinson. And if that happens while Robinson's popular, then that's somebody I want to fade. Outside of that, I know you only stopped at 6K, but kind of a game we skipped over talking about quarterbacks. And I want to get your thoughts on that game as a whole. and probably might be the biggest question of the slate is what are you doing with Antonio Gibson at 5,900, and what are you doing with that game overall? Because, with Fitzpatrick on the other side and, the Chargers possibly being without Eckler, and they don't really have running backs other than that, like we could see Herbert just sling the rock a little bit, and Fitzpatrick should be able to keep up on the other side. But at the same time, Gibson's pass roll should be pretty solidified this year. So what are your thoughts on that game, and what are your thoughts on Gibson?
Well, I love him. As far as the game is concerned, like I think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be anything that I'm fine. One way I think you could go is definitely kind of what you're talking about. I think going Antonio Gibson and a Washington defense stack, I think is a way you could go, but it's tough because on one hand, I love this Charger offense this year, but I just don't think this is it because that Redskin or that Washington football team defense is so damn good. And so it's just not something that I really want to mess with there. So I probably won't have any Chargers. And then, on this Washington football team side, like their whole defense is healthy back, with Bosa and Derwin James is back now, which he is a real problem.
Yeah,
and so getting it. So this game just is kind of like I just don't probably find myself taking a lot of it, but I do like Antonio Gibson, especially at his price. He's only 5,900. And so it's going to be hard to kind of get away from him at that price. But I also think that I will be interested to see where his ownership is because I think initially people were excited about it, but I think people have cooled off a little bit just because I think this game doesn't really project to be all that high scoring. Neither one of these teams are even in the top 10 this week in terms of just implied points. And where you have Washington at 22.75, and then you have the Chargers at 21.25 for this week. And so I don't know. Like, I think that I don't think you really have to play these guys. I think there's so much value on this slate that I don't think you should really feel the need to really play Antonio Gibson in this matchup against the Chargers, right?
Okay,
I think
good.
there's going to be much other opportunities to do so.
I was looking for an excuse to not play him, so I'm glad you're on the same page.
Yeah, I just don't think we really need to do that. Why play? For example, Antonio Gibson. Why not just play Raheem Mostert, who's $5,800 cheaper? Smash matchup.
He's got a 200-yard upside.
Yeah, going against the Lions, and so I don't know. I don't. Even Chris Carson, I think, is probably arguably in a better spot at 5,900. And in a game that should be high scoring, touchdown upside. So,
that's like taking a sip out of a vodka bottle in the morning when you thought it was water. That's the reaction you get when you say Chris Carson's name.
Walito in here with the super chat.
Let's
talking
go,
about
Walito.
Kamara. Traquan might miss week 1, so Kamara could have 20 targets. I guess it's possible, especially if Jair Alexander shadows Callaway. We'll talk about that when we get to wide receiver, but also nice to have this show back. Missed y'all. Thank you, Walito. You're always our number one, my man. Well, we'll talk about Callaway because that is a narrative I've heard all week about Callaway. Is that Jair Alexander, but we'll talk about that. So in terms of the rest of these running backs, is there any value running backs you're wanting to play this week?
Nope. I'm not messing with it. I'm taking, you've got Aaron Jones at 6,800, Mostert at 5,800. We talked about a little bit about James Robinson at 6,400, even though he might be popular. It's just, and you're going to pay up for McCaffrey. I am going to pay down get my value at defense, tight end, and wide receiver more than likely this week. Running back is the one position I just hate getting cute at running back because you really have to luck box into, a long touchdown and getting a guy who scores multiple touchdowns. Like if you were to play a guy, let's say Tony Jones, right? Perfect example. A guy who's going to probably get 8 to 10 touches in that Latavius Murray role. He has to house one from 60 yards for him to even sniff being a remotely good play, despite him being cheap. Give me a receiver where, they can catch 6 passes for 60 yards and hopefully luck into a touchdown, and then you're sitting at 18 points. So, it's running back. I just hate getting queued at running back. So I don't know if there's a cheap guy that you're on. We don't have the Ravens on this slate, or else Tyson Williams would be an answer. That would be a little different story because he's thrust in the kind of high volume role, but there's not really anybody like that on this slate at cheap prices.
So a couple of things. I think if there was someone, if you absolutely wanted to play a cheap running back, I think Chase Edmonds would be that answer. Just because a high scoring game, I think he's likely going to be, involved in the passing game. No, this is a situation because this is going to be the tough part because there's with it being week 1. And I think this is something that we should, talk about is that we don't really know what a lot of these players' roles are going to be right now. Right. Like, I think we can
James Conner.
Yeah. Like that's why that's a good one. Chase Conner and Chase Edmonds. It seems to sound like it very well could be Chase Edmonds, who's going to be the starter of this in this offense. But at the same time, I think if you look at it, I still think he's probably a guy who's never going to have more than 15 touches in a game. He's only had one goal line carry his entire career. One. That's insane to think that this guy's had one goal line carry, and this is his 3rd or 4th year in the league, and he has one goal line carry. So we know he's not going to have that. We know that's going to be James Conner's role. And so I don't really know how this is going to all shake out, but I do think Chase Edmonds against Tennessee in a game that they're going to be, a high scoring game that he could see, 6 to 8 targets, I think is relatively safe. And so at 4,600, I don't mind doing that. But I just feel the second point brings me to, I don't think you need to. I just think there's so much value at wide receiver. You just don't really need to pay down back this week. Like, I think, and there's enough value even at running back because I think we're seeing a lot of guys, even like a Joe Mixon at 6,200. I don't mind playing him there, right? Minnesota's defense isn't a defense that just scares me. I'm like, oh, I can't play Joe Mixon against that because you're talking about with Joe Mixon, a running back who's going to see 85% of the touches. Gio Bernard is gone. And so he is now going to see a larger workload in the passing game as well. So even if they do start to fall behind, he's still going to be utilized as a pass catcher in that backfield. And at 6,200, you're generally speaking not finding running backs that get that kind of opportunity. So, I like Joe Mixon at that price range at 6,200. It's just too cheap for him. So I don't mind going down to, with him. And then, completely agree. Aaron Jones. I don't know what DraftKings was doing to price him at 6,800. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Other than maybe because of who the Saints were as a run defense, but it still doesn't make sense to price him at $6,800. Only thing I could really think of is why we got him probably that low is because I don't know had Aaron Rodgers announced that he was coming back yet by then? Because I want to say he hadn't.
It's a good question. I'm not sure because the prices came out like a month early. So they might not have. He might not have announced by then.
So that very well could be why his price is where it's at.
But it's also because you look right next to his name, you see a red number 2 against the Saints defense. I think that's kind of why he's gotten priced down too. And I think, dude, I promise that is the blurbs I've seen. Like I've already seen it on all these big websites. Just for talking about week 1 from a season long standpoint. Like your Aaron Rodgers, your second round pick, Aaron Jones is going to have a tough matchup week 1 against the Saints. Like that's the consensus around the league. And it's just not true because this is going to be a completely different defense. And the offense is like, we always talk about, right? Like when an offense is worse, it creates more opportunities for the other team. And yes, Jameis Winston, we know he can score points, but he can also throw a ton of interceptions. And he's not as good as Drew Brees, no matter how much you want to think so, Kev. But he is not as good as Drew Brees, and the Saints were a top scoring offense with Drew Brees. So that just in turn is going to, I think, lead to more scoring chances for opposing teams this year, as the Saints can't play as much ball control as they normally have. And it's just such a good spot for Aaron Jones. I mean, a defense is being plugged with, just fill-in guys and rookies. So, yeah. I seriously might just, even on my Rodgers team, I might just play Aaron Jones because he can catch a lot of passes too.
Right, and that's also something that that really should be mentioned now that Jamal Williams is gone there.
Yep.
I don't think all of a sudden AJ Dillon is going to step into the true Jamal Williams role where Jamal Williams had 40 targets, something like that last year.
Yep.
30 or 40 targets. So that ain't happening for AJ Dillon. AJ Dillon, I could see 20 targets this year. And so I think some of those targets are definitely going to go to Aaron Jones. And so we're still talking about the most efficient running back, and the Aaron Jones over the last 2 years, the only running back that scored more touchdowns than him is Alvin Kamara is the only running back that has scored more touchdowns than him. So the touchdown upside is definitely there for him as well. So I just totally agree. Aaron Jones should be a lock button for most people, but it doesn't seem as many people are on that as they should be. So in terms of Alvin Kamara, do you have any interest in him this week? Because we know that they're probably going to be playing from behind. They're going to have to throw the ball. I do think Alvin Kamara could see 10 to 12 targets this week, and I don't think that is hot.
No, 10 to 12 might even be low. Like, we might see him approach the 15 target range. And yeah, I absolutely have interest in him. And, I think it's a real interesting spot to, I wouldn't just say, just play Kamara over CMC, but if you can figure out a way to play both, or, if you are looking for somehow to get that leverage, or maybe you're stacking the Chiefs and you just don't have the salary to get up to CMC or something. I think Kamara is a great play this week. I love that Green Bay New Orleans game. He will be my run back on my Aaron Rodgers team. There's just no way to get around it. On a full PPR site like Draftkings, he has legit 15 target upside. The only concern I have with Kamara this year is going to be his touchdown numbers without Breeze. But his touchdown numbers have been so ridiculous anyways that, he might regress to like a normal touchdown number for him. And it's still going to be like top 5 in the NFL. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. So yeah, the reception upside alone has me very interested in him.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And then I think, especially even just his price tag, considering, it's 8,600. He's also a player that's usually much higher than that. So yeah, I think you're getting a little bit of a discount as well. And I think people are going to look at it and say, well, I could play Alvin Kamara at 8,600, or I could pay up to 8,800 for Derrick Henry, or I could pay up to 9,100 for Dalvin Cook. And I think people are going to prefer to do that rather than paying the $8,600. And they're going to look at this offense going against Green Bay, and the narrative that, now that Drew Brees is gone, Captain Checkdown is gone, that he's just not going to get those kind of targets. And I think that's ridiculous. Sean Payton is a excellent, offensive-minded head coach. Believe me, he's going to figure out ways to manufacture touches for Alvin Kamara this year. Alvin Kamara is not all of a sudden going to get 50 targets in this offense. Some of those takes that I've seen are absolutely ridiculous and really based on nothing. So I like that 8,600. And I will just say this. I'm absolutely not – no way, no how playing Derrick Henry at $8,800. Whatever he has priced, only $300 less than Dalvin Cook. I will be out on that. That is going to be a big no from me, dog.
Yeah, no, I'm out.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've pretty much covered the running backs that we like here the most. Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook. Obviously Aaron Jones is lock button in. I think I think you could play James Robinson. Just understand the ownership that's probably going to be coming in for him. He's playing Houston. It's a great matchup. I think a lot of people are going to want to play James Robinson. I don't mind Miles Sanders at 6,500. I will say that. However, Atlanta's run defense was actually pretty decent last year. And so I think if he's going to get them, he's going to have to get there through the air. But at 6,500, if you're wanting a little bit of a pivot off of James Robinson, I don't mind Miles Sanders. And then Joe Mixon, I think, is in play at 6,200. And I really don't have much of interest of any running backs that are in the 5K range outside of really Raheem Mostert for me. So is there anybody else you want to talk about, or you want to jump over to wide receiver?
No, just the Arizona guys are. I think you're fine playing one of them. I think Connor would probably be the guy that I played, just because he can catch passes, and he likely gets the goal line role. Like I see Connor getting the Kenyon Drake role personally, and Chase Edmonds just keeps his role that he had last year. And if Kenyon Drake was 4,500, we'd be playing him this week, right, against Tennessee. So, Connor. Before he got hurt, he was turning out 100-yard rush games. So I'm not willing to write Connor off just yet. And I think he's an interesting play for cheap, and he would be the cheapest that I would go. But I think other than that, we can move on.
Oh, I agree. I think they're both in play. If you want to play one of them, I think they are. And I think this is where it comes into, like, if you have a lineup that you absolutely love, and if you only have, $4,800 left at a running back spot, plug in one of these guys. I think you could definitely do that. And I think it's not a bad way to go. I think of all the cheap running backs, I think, those are the only two that I really would feel like great about. Listen, I love Ty Johnson. I have been pounding the table for Ty Johnson. And I think, you could go there, but it's just way too thin of a play without really knowing anything else. Like, I think it's just a complete gamble to play somebody like Ty Johnson for the Jets. So it would have to be those only guys that I would think of. So anyways, I digress. Let's jump over to wide receiver. Listen, this is probably the most interesting, and I think this is where you're going to win this week, is figuring out those wide receivers, because there is such a wide range of wide receivers that you can play this week. I mean, there are multiple 3K wide receivers. There's so much value this week. It's not even funny. But let's start. Devontae Adams, 8,300. Tyreek Hill, 8,200. Calvin Ridley, 7,900. It's going to be really hard for me not to have a lot of that, especially against that defense. But he's 7,900. DeAndre Hopkins is 7,800. Justin Jefferson, 7,700. Stephon Diggs, 7,600. DK Metcalf, 7,500. AJ Brown, what are you doing? DraftKings only priced him at 7,100 because I'm going to have an absurd amount of AJ Brown against that Arizona defense. I mean, the secondary for Arizona's defense is absolutely atrocious, and I think I know they just lost one of their corners to retirement here recently. And then Adam Thielen, Keenan Allen, Julio Jones at 6,800. And then Tyler Lockett, Terry McLaurin, only 6,400, which seems a little bit too cheap for him. Deontay Johnson, 6,300. Juju at 6,200. DJ Moore at 6,100. And Jarvis Landry at 6K. So here at the wide receivers, I already talked about, I'm going to have a metric fuck ton of AJ Brown. I absolutely love him in this matchup. I think he is going to smash this week. There is not a single corner that Arizona has that's going to be able to stop him. And now you can't just double team him because you got Julio Jones on the other side of the field that you're going to have to worry about here. I definitely think he's going to play. I'm not worried about Julio Jones. I know he's been limited throughout a lot of the offseason and everything else. Not worried about that. But AJ Brown at 7,100. It's going to be hard pressed for me not to have a lot of them. Now, Calvin Ridley is also somebody, because there's nobody in the Philadelphia secondary that Darius Slay is not the same corner he was 2 or 3 years ago. He has definitely taken a step back. And so I like Calvin Ridley, but I also think Calvin Ridley is going to be really chalky this week. So as a pivot off of him, give me the $800 in savings to AJ Brown.
Yeah. I mean, like we said, that Tennessee-Arizona game is one of the most attractive games to attack this weekend. And, I mean, even with like Patrick Pierce and whatnot, as dusty as he is, that Arizona defense wasn't very good, against outside wide receivers last year. And, I mean, if this Tennessee offense is going to be good, it's going to flow through A.J. Brown through the pass game. And I think we see, Julio's – I think he's getting up there in age. He's going to continue to have his snaps monitored, just like he always does in Atlanta. He doesn't play 100% of the snaps. I think you're going to see a similar in and out rotation with him. But it is going to be the AJ Brown show. He should be the main guy there, despite Julio Jones being in town. So yeah, I think 7,100 is too cheap for his ceiling. I mean, AJ Brown is a guy who can go out and drop 35 on your head any game, really. And he can do it on very minimal targets too. So, damn, Chris Godwin just fumbled at the goal line. That's crazy. Dallas has the ball with 5 minutes left, down 2. But outside of that, I mean, Stephon Diggs, 7,600. I mentioned this Buffalo-Pittsburgh game. And the receivers there are way too cheap on both sides. Like Diggs, 7,600. You mentioned the Steelers guys, both Deontay and Claypool, down in the low 6s. I mean, freaking Claypool and Deontay are both guys that can go out and get you 25 to 30. And and the Steelers are one of the pass heaviest teams in the NFL, and so is Buffalo. So that game's got some cheap pieces for guys that have solid upside as well. And I think that game goes overlooked. And then we talked about Seattle. You can definitely play DK. You can definitely play Lockett. A guy that I might not come off of, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on him as well. I know you like Mostert, but Brandon Ayuk, 5,700 against Detroit. That just feels like lock button territory to me.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the matchup that he's probably going to see, have you ever heard of AJ Parker? Name ring a bell?
No.
That's going to be the corner. That's going to be covered. That gets the assignment to cover Brandon Ayuk this week. So good luck with that.
Dude, Ayuk is the next big thing. That kid's a stud. And playing with Shanahan too.
Oh no, for sure. And I guess we didn't even talk about like Jimmy Garoppolo as an option. I just don't think they're gonna have to throw the ball that much, to be honest with you. I think they're gonna be able to, I think I would prefer to just get like individual, shots at this game, whether it's Mostert, whether it's Kittle, whether it's Brandon Ayuk. That's the way that I would look at it, because I definitely would want some pieces of this game, but there's no way I'm game stacking this game, because there's no way Detroit's gonna be able to keep this game close.
Well, not only that, too, how many times do we see San Francisco score like 30-plus points, and it's so spread out that nobody really does anything? So you just kind of need to hope that one guy does it all, as opposed to, stacking them up, I think, and just, get exposure to one guy here and there.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of the value wide receivers, the 5 to 4K range guys, or even 3K guys, like, is there anybody that really stands out to you that you definitely want exposure to?
I want to hear your thoughts on Jacoby Myers with Mac Jones now at quarterback. And I know it's Miami, but let me read you these trends of Myers' snap counts over the last 3 weeks of the season last year. He played 34 slot snaps, 19 wide, 37 slot, 13 wide, 44 slot, 21 wide over the last 3 weeks of the season. So he transitioned into a mainly slot-heavy wide receiver. And we know the two big cornerbacks for Miami, Byron Jones and Xavier Howard, are on the outside. They play pretty much strictly outside. And last year, the slot corner for Miami was Nick Needham, but they signed Justin Coleman, the awful Detroit slot corner. So no matter which one of those two guys rolls out there in the slot, Jacoby Myers is going to have a very favorable matchup. And we know that, he's been a coveted target of Mac Jones already through camp and the preseason. And I mean, that offense doesn't really – they do have other pieces, but it seems like Jacoby has become their number one target. So I think he's very interesting at 5,100.
I think he's in play, and I think you're right. I think people are going to look at him and see that they're playing Miami and not really think too much about the other corners that are there and where he really positioning lines up, because he did the same thing really through training camp preseason this year. That's kind of where he was lining up, and so I don't mind him at his price for this week, but at the same time, like, I just think I don't know if he's necessary either at 5,100. Like, because I'm trying to what's his ceiling? And listen, there is no bigger Jacoby Myers fan there, Stan, I don't think, around than me, because I have talked about him all offseason. I mean, he was incredibly efficient last year. He was top 10 in yards per route run among all wide receivers last year as well. And so I love Jacoby Myers for sure. But I don't know, because this game kind of feels like a game that's probably going to be low scoring, that could end up being like a 21-17 type of game. And just because of the two teams' familiarity with each other as well. And so I just don't know if there's going to be enough there for him, though I don't think he's going to carry any ownership whatsoever. But at 5,100, I'm kind of like, okay, why not just play Tyler Boyd at 5,200? In a game that they're probably going to be trailing. They're going to have to throw the ball a ton. We already know how much that the Bengals play three wide receiver sets. So Tyler Boyd's going to be on the field a ton. He's the slot wide receiver there. And I think where a lot of the attention is going to be going to like T. Higgins, where Tyler Boyd, I think, can eat in the middle of that Vikings defense. The Vikings defense is going to be better this year. They did get Danielle Hunter is back this year. They upgraded the corners a little bit with bringing in Patrick Peterson, and also Rashad Breeland is also there now. But I mean, those we're talking about aging veteran DBs as well. But Tyler Boyd's not gonna have to worry about that anyways because he's playing it within the slot. So for me, like I think Tyler Boyd just make it always a little bit more interesting. I also think somebody like Sterling Shepard, with all of the question marks that we have around, it doesn't sound like Evan Ingram may not play. Kenny Galladay's been banged up. And so like Sterling Shepard could absolutely eat in this offense. Kadarius Toney's also hurt. And so, in a game that they very well could be playing from behind, I think at 5,100, I think, Sterling Shepard could see 12 to 14 targets this week, depending on how things play out there. Laviska Shenault now with Travis Etienne, I think they're going to you move him all around, manufacture touch as well. So I guess what I'm saying is I just think there's a lot of other players. Like, I don't mind Jacoby Myers, but there's just so many wide receivers in this range that I think there's some other ones that I would just rather have.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. As he's not a guy that I'm going to be jamming in, but if I were to, with salary, if I were to land on 5,200 remaining, I think Jacoby would be the guy in that range that I would play, especially because he's going to be much lower end than all those other guys. But I mean, outside of that, scrolling down a little bit, I think the Cardinals receivers are very interesting. I think, one of AJ Green or Rondale Moore could have a big game other than DeAndre Hopkins. Valdez Scantling, I mentioned how I love Green Bay offense. Valdez Scantling is the number 2 wide receiver there. He's 3,700 against New Orleans in that makeshift defense that they now have. So he's very interesting. Devonta Smith, number 1 wide receiver in Philly, 4,500. I mean, there's just a lot of value wide receivers. And then that's not even taking into account these guys down at 3K, like Terrace Marshall and whatnot. So just real quickly sum up these 3K receivers for me. Are there any guys that, you are just think they're going to be so popular that you're just going to avoid them completely? And then are there any guys that stand out as, you just want to jam them in almost every lineup you got?
Well, there's a few. One, I know he's not. I mean, he's 4,100, but Michael Pittman at 4,100 is absolutely ridiculous, especially with Carson Wentz back. That Carson Wentz is going to be healthy, offensive line is going to be good to go. So there's nobody in the Seahawks secondary that worries me whatsoever. And so
run back the Seahawks stack with.
Yeah, and so Michael Pittman, 4,100. I think that is definitely a way that you could go. And also T.Y. Hilton being gone. So you're going to have much more of a consolidated target share as well to Michael Pittman. I think Paris Campbell's also in play here, somebody that people aren't going to want to look at. And if I'm paying down at a wide receiver where I think there's going to be a lot of ownership come in, compared to when we're talking about normal 3K wide receivers, but Paris Campbell's $3,700. And I think people would probably prefer to pay down because I think Terrace Marshall and Elijah Moore are probably going to be the 2 guys, especially if Jameson Crowder misses this week. I don't know if he cleared COVID or not. I have not seen at this point. I guess I'll look real quick. But so I do think that if he is, Elijah Moore is going to get a lot of ownership. I mean, it's been Elijah Moore hype season for most of the offseason. But so when I talked about Marquez Cavallo, and a lot of people, I've heard this narrative all week that it's a terrible matchup. It's a terrible matchup for Marquez Cavallo. Jair Alexander is going to shadow him the whole game. And I'm like, no, he's not. Jair Alexander didn't shadow a single game last year past week 7. They stopped having him move. Okay. And so like he does not shadow. And there's zero chance that the Packers are going to shadow Marquez Cavallo with Jair Alexander. They're going to allow them to play sides. Okay. And so that means that people are going to be completely off Marquez Cavallo at $3,400 because of that. I do not mind playing him because I think what we saw, I think there's nobody else there. It's him. It's Traquan. It's Adam Troutman. Sounds like he's good to go. He was not even on the injury report. But who knows about that? That's a muddy situation between Troutman and Juwan Johnson. But I think Marquez Cavallo could see 10 to 12 targets in this game. Like, it's definitely in the range of possibility. We know Jameis Winston will chuck it deep anytime he gets an opportunity to do so. Marquez Cavallo, I mean, listen, I know it was preseason, but those were some special plays that we saw him make, in that game. And all we've heard all offseason is how well he's played and how good he looks. And so while, yes, I think he's going to see some Jair Alexander for sure, he is not going to get shadowed by Jair Alexander. And so it's a tired narrative that I've been hearing all week, and it's not true. It's the same thing with Jalen Ramsey. Like people have been say the same thing about Jalen Ramsey doesn't shadow either. He plays his side. And I think that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to move Marquez Cavallo all around the field. He's going to play in the slot. He's going to play on both X and Y. And so I think Marquez Cavallo is definitely in play. And I think I don't think anybody's going to want to play him because everybody's going to be perceiving that he's going to get shadowed by Jair Alexander, because that's all I keep hearing.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's definitely in play at 3,400. I mean, even if he does get shadowed, his volume's still going to be good enough for a 3,400 wide receiver, and he's still a talented enough wide receiver that he can pay off. He might, if he were to get shadowed, I mean, it would take away his ceiling, but I think his floor is still high enough at 3,400. And I know in GPPs you need the ceiling outcome, but I guess my argument is that the ceiling outcome is still there, I think. So he's definitely somebody that I'm going to consider still, especially if Traquan were to miss, because I mean, but I guess then the counter argument is if Traquan's out, then why not use Jair to shadow, because the Saints literally have nobody else. But
I just don't think he'd be worried about it. I mean, I don't think he would feel like, is Marquez Cavallo something that you are feel threatened by? I mean, I guess maybe if he has a quick start, and he's really producing early, and maybe they move to do that. Yeah, it's possible. But I don't know. We'll see. But I just don't think I think it's kind of overblown from what everybody's trying to make it out to be. And not to mention he's $3,400. He doesn't really need to do a ton either, just to pay off that price and to make him worth it. And where I think so much ownership is going to come in on these guys, like I said, like Terrace Marshall and Elijah Moore. I think they're definitely going to be more owned than what he is. So I think that's a mistake. Because listen, you're talking about a number 3 wide receiver on the Panthers, which again, I love Terrace Marshall, but I think for just this 1 week, I mean, volume is going to be a question there. Now, can he find the end zone? Absolutely, because the guy is a absolute machine inside the red zone. But I mean, we're still talking about a volume problem there. I don't think he's going to be able to see the volume that Marcus Callaway is going to see, and the same thing with with Elijah Moore. Now, I will say, where do you think Marvin Jones' ownership comes in? Because he's only he's only $3,600.
Too low. It's too low. Whatever it is, it's too low. I mean, he was basically I know Chark is coming off a finger surgery, but I mean, that's even more of an excuse for Marvin Jones to continue to be involved. But I mean, you're playing Houston, and probably everybody is going to play James Robinson, right? What's a great leverage play? We'll play the number one right now. The number 1 wide receiver is Marvin Jones. Yes, Chark, I think, is more talented currently and will end up being the number 1 when it's all said and done. But Chark was limited all preseason because of the finger issue and is just finally now getting back to, doing everything. So Lawrence, it has the rapport with Marvin Jones more so than anybody else. And we know how explosive Marvin Jones can be, and playing against that Houston defense. We talk about playing guys for ceilings. Marvin Jones has a monster ceiling, especially at that price tag. So I am in. Definitely sign me up for Marvin Jones.
Yeah, and it's crazy too because you have somebody like DJ Chark who's $5,600. Like, it's not even close. Like, DJ Chark feels like he should be $3,000.
Yeah,
he should. I don't know why they priced him up $5,600. Oh, look at this guy. Who is this? Derek Brown. Who is that?
He caught wind of you talking about Jair not shadowing, because I know Derek has dropped that nugget in our chat before. So he must have heard you. His ears must have been burning. He heard you talking about Jair not shadowing. He figured he had to jump in.
Well, I don't know who this Derek Brown guy. I know who Debro. I know. Is that Debro? Is that the same guy? Derek Brown just looks weird to me.
Yeah, I always got a beard. It's not always this full, but it's not as good as Derek's beard either.
Well,
sorry,
we wish you were here, but he's sold out to the big man. He can't be on. So anyway, where were we?
Talking about Marvin Jones and how we have raging stiffies for Marvin Jones.
Yeah, it's going to be hard not to play him at $3,600. It's just incredibly too cheap for him. At $3,600, he doesn't really have to even do much to pay that off. But I think there's a real possibility you're probably looking at 5-6 receptions for 80 yards and a touchdown. If he does that,
again, you're looking, despite no matter, like, people always want to play values just because they're cheap, because they kind of have maybe they go from 2 targets a game to seeing 5 targets that game, and they just play them because, their role is slightly increasing. But in tournaments, you still have to have ceiling outcomes to take down tournaments, right? So, like, your entire roster of guys has to have pretty much 20 plus points for you to have a shot at taking down tournaments. And Marvin Jones has that, and he's cheap. Like, that is a good value play in a tournament, because Marvin Jones has a path to 100 yards. Marvin Jones has a path to 2 touchdowns. He's playing Houston. He's 3,600. He's currently the number 1 wide receiver on the team. That is a good value play. Now, if he starts creeping up to being the highest owned wide receiver on the slate, then we can adjust, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Oh, no, not at all. I don't think that's going to happen. He's probably going to be the highest owned of the value wide receivers, but he's definitely not going to be
I don't know that he will, dude. I think people get really excited about all the rookies. I think Rondale Moore, 3K against Tennessee in that massive total game. Elijah Moore, the hot rookie for the Jets. Terrace Marshall, the hot rookie for Carolina. Like, I think all those guys are going to end up stealing a lot of this ownership, and I think it's going to be spread out. And that's not even to mention Diami Brown with the Curtis Samuel news. If Curtis Samuel's ruled out, just Brown slots in as the number 2 wide receiver there. He could see some ownership. That's not somebody I'm going to play, but that's another body to take ownership away from, like, Marvin Jones down in that range. So, yeah. I guess all of this to sum that we really like Marvin Jones.
Yeah. You mentioned that you really want to play this Green Bay, and you talked about Marquez Cavallo scaling. But why not Randall Cobb? Like, I think Randall Cobb, like, I don't love Randall Cobb from, like, a season-long perspective, like somebody that you're just going to, like, in a season-long league, or somebody you want to play every week. But in this matchup, against the Saints, and I kind of like Randall, especially early in the year. Like, there's been a lot of positive buzz coming out about Randall Cobb and how well he's looked in this offense. And I have a feeling that Aaron Rodgers is going to want to kind of show why he wanted him so bad, right? Because he's the one that pounded the table for Randall Cobb. They obviously already have that rapport that built in from all the years they played together, and he's super cheap as well. Like, do you have any interest in including him in a stack of Aaron Rodgers?
I don't, because it's easy for me to see MVS's ceiling, right? He can literally get his ceiling on 4 catches. He can go 4 for 105, catching like a 60-yard touchdown, and then have a touchdown to go along with it. So you're looking at 15, 18. You're looking at 24 points right there for MVS on a 4-105-1 line. What's Cobb's line? Like, his ceiling? He's probably capped in terms of yards, right? Like, I don't see him eclipsing 100 yards. And so at that point, he's probably got to score twice for me or catch close to 10 passes. So I think you're looking at a ceiling for Cobb of 7 for 60 and 1. That's 19 for his absolute ceiling. Whereas MVS, he could go over the 4-105-1. He could go 6 for 130 and 2. Because he has that explosive ability, whereas Cobb is more short passes and volume driven. And Cobb has been utilized near the goal line for the past few teams that he's been on. So, it's not out of the realm of possibility for him to catch touchdowns, but I guess it's just you're playing touchdown roulette at that point.
I think he has a much safer floor than what
definitely.
Yeah. And so, while I don't think he has quite a high of a ceiling, but I do think that at $3,900, I don't really mind it, especially maybe just included in a stack. So let's try to wrap this up. Let's move on to tight ends, but I do want to just hit on a couple really quickly wide receivers, and then we could move over that we didn't really talk about, so we're not doing disservice to especially this kind of middle part wide receivers. But We talked about like I already mentioned Tyler Boyd. I think Corey Davis is definitely in play. Jerry Jeudy we did not bring up, but he at 4,800. I absolutely love this matchup. He is likely going to play. I would say the majority in the slot with Cortland Sutton back now. And so I think with him playing from the slot, he's not going to see James Bradbury. So I do like that. And I think he probably leads his team in targets, at least for this 1 week. So I like him quite a bit in this matchup against the Giants. And then T. Higgins, 4,700. That is incredibly too cheap for him. He's the number one wide receiver on the Bengals. And in a game that they're going to have to throw the ball, they're going to be playing from behind. Devonta Smith at $4,500 is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so definitely didn't want to leave here without talking about him. This is a great matchup. Listen, if I'm going to stack anybody with Jalen Hurts, it is definitely Devonta Smith in this matchup against the Falcons. There is not a single corner that worries me whatsoever in Atlanta. And so I like Devonta Smith at his price tag of $4,500. We already talked about Michael Pittman. Love him and Paris Campbell and stacks with Carson Wentz if that's the way you want to go, or as a run back on Russell Wilson stack as well. And then I already talked about the top guys that I love, which is Ridley and A.J. Brown. I love both of those guys, but breaking news. So is there any other wide receivers you just want to hit on really quickly, or do you want to move over to tight end?
No, I think we can jump on over to tight end.
All right, so tight end's pretty simple to me, and this is going to be straightforward. I'm either going to play Kelsey, I'm going to have some Kittle, and I think Hawkinson can be involved in the conversation, but I don't really love the matchup with that defense that San Francisco has. If not, Kyle Pitts. I definitely think Kyle Pitts is in play at $4,400. The Eagles have absolutely zero anybody that's going to be able to stop him, that's going to be able to hold him back. And yes, I get it that he's a rookie, and I know he's had a lot of hype, but he's not just a tight end. He's a wide receiver that's designated as a tight end. The dude's a monster. There's nobody on this Philadelphia defense that's going to be able to slow him down. So I like him. Now, past that, I'm paying down at the tight end position. I'm going to punt, and I'm going to take some shots on a few guys here late. If you want to go Gerald Everett in a stack, I don't mind that. Tell me about Tyler Croft. Many, many moons ago, if you've been listening to this podcast for long ago, Tyler Croft was a guy that I was all about that life, that Tyler Croft life when he played for the Bengals, and he was minimum $2,500. And I was pounding the table for Tyler Croft, telling everybody that they need to play Tyler Croft. It's Tyler Croft week. And there were some other podcasts that I know heard the take and tried to make joke of it. Well, I got the last laugh whenever he had like 5 catches for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he was sub 1% owned that week. And so, am I saying that's going to happen this week? No, but he is the tight end. There's no other tight end. They traded Chris Herndon, so he's definitely the pass catching tight end. He's only 2,500. So if you want to punt, I don't mind it. Like, I think you could see 3 for 30 and a touchdown, and if he does that, you are happy.
Yeah, I don't hate Croft. I mean, like you said, there's no other tight end on that Jets roster, so definitely an interesting play there. I think if I'm going down there, though, what's your thoughts on Ferkser for Tennessee? Do you think he's going to get a lot of ownership? Because I mean, that's very cheap exposure to that fastest pace, one of the highest total games of the slate. And Ferkser played a lot of big slot last year. We know no Johnny Smith there this year. So thoughts on Ferkser?
I don't mind him. I think it's just part of the stack. I'm not going to be like aggressively going after him, but I definitely think if you in a stack with, if instead of playing like AJ Brown and Julio together, if you want to do that, I think maybe going AJ Brown and Ferkser is definitely a way to get different and separate yourself, get a little bit of leverage on that, because I think most people are probably just going to stack Julio with AJ Brown or just go the one, on the one side or whatever. And so I don't mind it. It's just not something that I'm just going to go out and like, I have to get a piece of this. But at $3,200, I definitely think he's in play in this matchup.
Okay. Yeah, because that's the cheap guy that I've been zeroed in on kind of. Outside of that, man, I mean, I guess Gerald Everett's a little interesting for Seattle. I mean, we've seen Russ target the tight end position before. He's just never done it to one player. He's kind of spread it around. like Hollister and Disley and guys like that. So, I mean, is Everett the most athletic pass catcher he's had so far?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think he's interesting, and Indy runs a lot of zone defense too. So definitely a good spot for a tight end. I'll have to do some more digging on Everett, but I definitely think I'm interested in him.
Yeah, I think that, kind of like we talked with these other guys, like I think that I could easily see a touchdown coming his way, and so I don't mind that one bit. And I think there's always been this narrative that Russ doesn't really target his tight ends, and I think that's just ridiculous. It's not even true. It's just
it's just never been a guy there. It's just been spread out to multiple guys.
And then when it happened, but we've also seen guys break out and then they get hurt, right? Almost all of them seem to get hurt. So hopefully it's not a curse,
right?
But as of right now, like that's really kind of where I'm at. Like, I mean,
what about Dan Arnold?
Dan Arnold is always in play. Okay, let's be honest.
He's playing the Jets.
I know, Mr. Air Yards. Okay,
yeah.
Follow the air yards, and you'll do well at tight end.
Prosper. All right.
Yeah,
I think that's good for tight end.
Yeah, I mean, if Tyler Conklin at 2,900, whatever. I wish we could play Adam Troutman, but I don't really know what to make of him at this point. He was a guy that I was all about, and then he played in 2 preseason games and didn't see a single target, so that was concerning. But he is back, and he's not on the injury report. So if you want to take a shot on Adam Troutman, 2,900, no one's going to have you on him. Let's jump over to defense. Listen, I cannot pay up for the 49ers at 4,200, the Patriots at 3,900. I guess you can this week because there's so much value that I guess if you really wanted to pay up at tight end or at defense, you could because there's just, like I said, there's so much incredible value this week that it could allow you to do so. But I pretty much just automatically fill out my team, and then whatever amount of money I have left at tight end or at defense, then I just lock in the Bengals or the Falcons or the Texans or whatever. But is there any low price defense that you have any interest in?
Not really. I mean, I'm gonna end up punting with one of them just because that's what I usually do. But I mean, if I was choosing one down there, I mean, I think Buffalo is interesting against Pittsburgh just because Pittsburgh 2,500, just because Pittsburgh throws the ball at a near league high clip, and Ben Roethlisberger can turn the ball over. So I think Buffalo is interesting. Not that I absolutely love them, but if I can find the extra 500 to get to Buffalo over a 2K punt, then I will. But I mean, again, defense is so unpredictable that, I'm fine with just punting defense and getting in all the other guys that you want. But above them, like I mentioned at the top of the show at the running back position, I think the Vikings are a very good defensive play this week against Cincinnati. Burrow's first game back off injury. They're dealing with some O-line issues. Minnesota made some defensive upgrades in the offseason. So I think that's a game Minnesota can win and play from in front the whole game. So more pass attempts for a Cincinnati team that's already going to throw a lot. I think Minnesota's interesting, and 3K is probably the highest I would go for defense.
I don't mind the Broncos at 3,300. They're playing the Giants with sorry-ass Daniel Jones. So, I mean, in this offense, they're already really banged up. Saquon, who knows how much he's going to play. And so, at that $3,300, I don't mind that if you want to pay up a little bit. But I'm just not going up to the upper tier of, the Patriots or the 49ers. I just don't think there's any reason to do that whatsoever.
Nope, there isn't.
So, all right. Well, then I guess that pretty much wraps this up. We got through week 1, but we cannot get through week 1 without building our first Millie Maker lineup.
Let's do it.
So, why don't you start it off? How do you want to start this build?
Aaron Jones.
Love it. All right. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lock in DK Metcalf.
Ooh, interesting. You know what? Let's just do it. Let's stack Russ with him.
Okay. Give me Michael Pittman.
And give me Gerald Everett for the full stack.
All right. So that leaves us with $5,300 per player. We still have running back, wide receiver, flex, and defense. Let's see. Okay. I don't know how this will work out. I'm going to go with Dalvin Cook.
Interesting. Give me Marvin Jones. That leaves us $4,250 for two players, $8,500 left for two players. Which, if we go 2K defense, that leaves $6,500. And you can play anybody below $6,500. And then we can do defense from there. Like you could go Ayuk and 2,800 defense.
What if we go... Damn. I was trying to get Vikings in, but I don't think that's going to work.
5,500.
Unless there's somebody in that range that you wanted to...
Nah, you'd have to play Jacoby Myers at that point.
Or
we can not play Everett and play Ferkser and then play Vikings and Ayuk.
Oh, okay. Let's do that.
Okay, let's do that. Let's do that.
All right.
Little 2v2 action already to start the year. Little Ferkser Ayuk or Everett and Jacoby Myers. That's Matty 2v2 right there.
Yeah.
Ryan would be proud.
Wouldn't have it any other way. So, okay. Final team with Russell Wilson, Aaron Jones, Dalvin Cook, DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman, Marvin Jones, Anthony Ferkser, Brandon Ayuk, and Vikings defense with no money left on the table. I feel really good about this lineup. So we are going to lock this son of a bitch in. Week 1 in the books. The Patriots.
Man, it's good to be
the
Patriots.
Bucks.
The Bucks won on a last-second field goal.
I saw Tom Brady and just immediately went to Patriots. Yeah. So, hate to see it, but hey, you got to be happy with the way the Cowboys played.
Oh, definitely. I mean, they had the lead there, and honestly, they missed an extra point and 2 field goals earlier in the game. I know one of them was a 60-yarder, but really should have been 4 extra points on the board and should have had a 5-point lead in that last drive. But that's all right. I mean, they played a lot better than I thought they would. Dak looked absolutely incredible his first game back. So I think they're in for a monster year. And hey, maybe you never know. Maybe this is a preview of the NFC Championship. Maybe we get a rematch come January. So.
No, for sure. So, an excellent start to the week. And I think there's going to be a lot of great football this weekend. So, other than that, week 1 in the books. We'll be back again next Thursday. You can follow Maddie on Twitter at MaddieDFS. You can follow me on Twitter at FantasyBrad13. I appreciate everybody checking it out. I appreciate all the support. Go over to our YouTube channel. We stream there every single Thursday night. And we also have a bunch of other stuff coming out. We stream on Wednesdays, for any season-long stuff. Sunday mornings, we'll be live for Live Before Lock. And then we also go live Sunday night for the waiver wire stuff for season long. But also, Maddie's going to be doing a weekly video for DFS this week for wide receiver, or not. He's going to be doing a weekly video for wide receiver and cornerback matchups this week, and every single week from here on out. So I definitely should go check that out. That'll be dropping on YouTube. Should be on Friday. So again, I appreciate everybody checking out the video, and I appreciate everybody checking out the show. We're happy to be back. We'll see you guys again next week. Peace.